which we have organized, and I know there are like few people who have joined, but eventually there'll be more people who will be joining, and we will be also recording this lecture. It will go on YouTube live, and there are a lot of devotees from temple. They will be also watching. So this is one of the rare opportunity where we have His Grace Baladeva Vidyabhushan Prabhu with us, because every day we have been reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and many of us have read Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita a lot. How much we cherish those memories of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and also how much we admire all the efforts and the pains which have gone behind making and compiling the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is one of the momentous and one of the most important service which has been done in ISKCON for all the devotees in ISKCON and for many generations to come, to compile such a wonderful biography of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So we have one such wonderful devotee who has witnessed this compilation, not just witnessed, but he was part of this entire process of this compilation, and he interviewed many devotees, and he traveled in many places, and he was there with Satswarup Das Goswami Maharaj. So we would like to hear from this devotee about his experiences behind the making of the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and also share some of his experiences and his realizations, and maybe some things from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, what we like, what how it has come up to this stage right now, and how many changes it has gone through. So we would love to hear all of them. So I take this opportunity once again and consider this as my great honor to invite His Grace Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushan Prabhu to our ISKCON Boston online program. I pass it on to His Grace Baladeva Vidyabhushan Prabhu. So, Hare Krishna, dear Prabhu, please unmute yourself. Hare Krishna. Kaushik Prabhu, were you able to hear me what I said?
Yes, Prabhu, clearly, yeah.
Okay, I think I don't know. So we have Vira Bhavan as Prabhu. He joined there because I can't, and I don't know why they are.
They are right. Huh? Oh
no, I was here. So.
No, I was.
Oh, this is mine. Yeah.
No, these are mine.
Oh, is yours?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, yes.
Hello. Vanamali Pandit Prabhu.
A quick suggestion, right?
One.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I'm there. So sorry, Baladeva. I hope you heard our introduction.
Haribo, Vanamali Prabhu.
Oh, you missed that. Okay.
Sure, we're unmuted.
No, I'm not muted. I think. Were you able to hear my introduction, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, I was able to hear your introduction.
No, I'm asking Baladeva Vidyabhushan Prabhu.
Vanamali Pandit does.
Yeah, are you able to hear me, Prabhu? Baladeva Prabhu?
Screen share?
No, we're fine actually. They can hear us.
If,
start video.
I mean, they will see you.
Kaushik Prabhu, make him as a host.
They can
Kaushik
hear
Prabhu,
you,
make him a
but
host.
they will see you, but you won't be able to see and hear them. You can start the video. So now these devotees can see you.
Stop video. The host has spotlighted your video for everyone.
She was online. I was trying to call it.
I guess should I start talking now?
I don't think so.
It's almost sad now. He's going to give a talk. I think maybe, I don't know, our devotee should get on. Oh, okay, no problem. Well, thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Well, the phone is on, so the number is 518-754-1108.
Baladeva Prabhu, are you trying to reach out to someone?
I am ready.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Vanamali Pandit Prabhu. I think Prabhuji is waiting for your instruction to start the class.
Yeah, there's
I-
no indication here whether I should start or not.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, Prabhu. Yes, you can start. I think we already introduced you. Please.
So could someone give me a call? 518-754-1108. Anyone in the group
Yeah,
can
fine.
tell me
I'll call
if
you.
I should start
Okay, I'm calling you.
Or just unmute yourself.
or unmute yourself. There we go. Haribo. Yeah, I can't hear anybody over here. Oh, okay. Okay, and you want me to speak about the Lilamrita? Okay. Okay, so I'll just start speaking and, anyone can call me on the phone with questions. Since it doesn't seem like, you're coming through from this side. Yeah. Okay. Haribo. So sorry for the unfortunate delay. My name is Baladeva Vidyabhushan, disciple of Satsarup Maharaj. I worked with him closely on the Prabhupada Lilamrita, mostly as a interviewer. Actually, the first thing I did was organize the letters. The letters had been collected at BBT in Los Angeles. People sent copies of their letters. And that was the first line of, say, interview or information was what Prabhupada said himself or got letters from him, especially from before he came to America. So all his correspondence was organized, and then all the persons were leads. All the persons named were leads. So finding them and interviewing them was an adventure. And so we had different resources. We had persons that were typing like a team in LA, madly typing all of Prabhupada's lectures. And then they would pick up lectures and room conversations. And then from that, they would pick up different biographical information that Prabhupada himself had given. He might mention a place that he went to or people that he met and different things about his childhood or his business. All these things were, in his own record and in his own words. So these are very important pieces of the puzzle. And then while out interviewing, I would get things like movies, more letters, movies, and of course the interviews. The interviews were very, at that time, that was 1979. At that time, the memories were quite vivid. It's not like 40 years later now that, you know, people are trying to remember what went on. They were just in the midst of separation from Prabhupada, real intense separation. So probably 80% of the people ended up crying in the interview. They it was such intense emotional experience for them to remember Prabhupada in such a personal way, so close to his departure. So we had that information. All that information was then typed. I traveled with one of those Indian steel trunks, or not steel, aluminum trunk that would lock, and I had a good Sony tape recorder as well as cassette tapes and my clothes, etc., in the trunk. My clothes, just another set of dhotis and kurtas. And that was it. I would travel around the world and stay as long as there was someone to interview. And, you know, ultimately I went to every continent except Australia and Africa. I went everywhere else where Prabhupada had gone and had exchanges with people, devotees, professors, poets, medical doctors, all kinds of people whose lives that he touched. So the importance of the Lilamrita is incalculable because it was done so soon after Prabhupada disappeared, like in the history of biographies of saintly persons. None have been done so close to the departure of the person. Prabhupada Lilamrita stands out like that. And that's also the importance of reading the whole biography. Satsvarup Maharaj mentioned this in a Zoom talk he gave to the congregation at Bhaktivedanta Manor. It's like practically the first thing he said is like, what you really have to do is read to get the full essence of Prabhupada. You have to get the whole Lilamrita. You don't get that in the condensed version. There's different names for it. He built the house the whole world could live in, etc. So that puts it in a category all of its own. And he mentioned that you know, you just don't get Prabhupada. I did the here, let me tell this person to be quiet. Haribo, you're loud. So where was I? So the I lost my train of thought. So anyway, the condensing of the book was done simply by deletion. It's exactly the same material as the bigger version, only the first volume had to be rewritten from 300 pages down to 55. And that was the only part that was rewritten. The whole other 6 volumes were all just by deletion, deleted different passages, and every one was, heartbreaking to take it out because there was so much nectar. So what you lose is the essence of Prabhupada, the sweetness of Prabhupada, and you get like a regular biography with all the data there, but the sweetness is taken out compared to when you read the whole series, all the volumes. They're very inexpensive. They've been reprinted in India. I think they're available. You may have them in the store. I know they're available to the boys, Ram, Roy, and the boys in New York Temple. They have a big stock of them, and they're $50 or $100 or something like that. Certainly affordable. And our recommendation is that you read them all to really get the essence of Prabhupada. As far as the actual inner workings of the biography team, it was a whole team effort, including there was many typists. All the interviews had to be typed, and all the room conversations and Bhagavatam and all of that had to be typed in order to get things out that were biographically important leads. So there was that would be the first step, to collect whatever leads we had in the books, and then Satsvaram Raj would send me. It was done chronologically, so he would send me to whatever places there were. He had a sense of how many pages would be covered by a certain number of years in a number of places. So I would go to those places and do interviews, and then that material would go back to the typists. Then it went to a person who compiled it and put it into order chronologically. Then there was another person who took that material and refined it more to say, let's just say 5 people gave the same story. Well, 3 of them might have not been so devotionally stable, and the others may have 2 completely different, not completely different, but different details of the same event. And then you'd look at what the others would say and try and come up with the most viable explanation or coverage of an event. And then all of them would be handed to Satsvaram Raj, all the things that had been put in order and then squeezed into, the category that we wanted. So he would get that information and get up very early, get up at 11 or 12 o'clock and work on it during prime time. So that hi Bo Mook. Mook's my old buddy. So then we would work from that material. Also, we would get other, we'd ask those people. Well, actually, they would have been interviewed previously, or someone else interviewed, and they gave leads for people to interview. I would interview them again. And it was very important to let people talk. We had what were called canned memories, which means it was a memory that's firmly burned into someone's wiring in their brain of exactly what they felt and what they thought they saw and heard during an event with Prabhupada. And then let them speak their, all their canned memories without cutting in and asking questions, and then take notes. And this is good information for anyone doing interviews. And then make notes during that, and then ask your questions afterward. You would say, who the important ones were, who else was there. And then those would all be leads to other people in that event that would remember that particular event. And hopefully they were in the same area, or sometimes, especially in America, you get people in California that were in New York when Prabhupada was there, or vice versa. In New York when Prabhupada was in California, we had quite a few like that. So that was a very important piece of information. And then you'd ask more details of, colors and sights and smells and what Prabhupada said and what was the mood and what did the other say. If it was a professor, what did they say? This is all if no one, if he didn't have a tape of it going, or if there was a tape that would be studied carefully. And then the background, the setting was all there. So that was an important part. India was particularly interesting because we're talking, 1979, 1980. So that's, more than 40 years ago. Basically, India hadn't changed since Prabhupada was there. Even his house where he was born, and so many different things. So all those places were the same. So you get pictures of them and talk to the people and try to discern what was, what was actually valid and what was a little bit sort of not straightforward. For example, there was probably 20 people that said they would, that this was the typewriter that Swamiji typed his manuscripts on, and then, it always involved a little bit of money to buy the typewriter and that kind of thing. So But everyone, since Prabhupada became famous, everyone wanted to be seen as close to him, and a number of people said that they were the one that suggested that Swamiji go to New York to preach first. I was the one that sent Swamiji like that. We got a lot of that in India, but there's other than that, there was so much available uh, available information from India. I remember in particular, like Prabhupada had his room where he did type at, what was the name of that colony? I don't remember the name of the place where he stayed, that particular, but you could take the walk that he would take to go to the publisher, or not the publisher, the printer. It was all hand typeset, old style, where to be they individually put in typesetting, little squares with the letters on them, and they would typeset and then roll it by hand, and it's a real ancient operation. But you could walk there, and then the paper seller was there, and the carts were there. They carried the paper on, and we would check it out. Like for example, the paper seller, Siddhamal and Sons. So I said, well, how do we know that Swamiji actually bought his paper here? So he goes in this dusty old wall full of customers' files. He pulled out Prabhupada's file and dusted the thing off, and the dust was flying. And he opened it up, and sure enough, there was his receipts, and everything was there on file in this dusty old room. So, it was unique like that, and you get that kind of confirmation that yes, Prabhupada was here, and yes, he bought his paper here. And then they'd have these men, because it was such tight quarters, they'd have carts that were relatively narrow, and because there's really no room for animals, you'd have these carts loaded high with paper and books, and it was the whole book printing area, and they were still there, still using them. And you had to really pay attention, otherwise you'd get run over. It was that sort of mad close association. So that was his, just picture Prabhupada in his dhoti and pointy shoes and Swami hat, mixing in this milieu of mad, passionate work going on. And then there was another short walk to the printer. Printing press wasn't there at the time. The owner, still lived in the neighborhood. So he came by to see what was up, and he said, oh yes, I sold that typesetter to such and such place. And so we were able to go and get pictures of that. There was, it was quite a scene. I don't know if any of you have been to India, but especially then, you know, it's very easy to get a crowd, and you know, it's very fragile to, you know, when there's money involved. So they decided that, you know, they would charge. Basically, the crowd decided that, you know, the man should charge for the taking pictures of the press, and he, you know, so we did that, took the pictures, and then they surrounded the car, and it was actually scary because they were getting angry that we weren't. They knew we had money and we're sitting in the car. They started pulling the driver out of the car. That's usually what they do, is they beat up the driver, and then, you know, you feel sorry for him, so you pay up. So, you know, before they could get him out, what we did was, I was sitting in the front seat, and threw $100 or 100 rupee note out the window, and so there was a big fight and diving for that. And so when they did that, I put my foot on the gas, so the people in front of the car had to jump away, and you know, they saw we meant business because they were about to get run over. And even the driver was kind of on the side of the crowd. He said, no, Swamiji, no, Swami, we should not do this thing. But we were scared. We had to get out of there. Satru Maharaj was in the car, and who else was there? A photographer just died. I forget his name, from BTG. And so that was just one of the many scenes that went on in old Delhi. A very unique atmosphere. So, you know, we could actually trace Prabhupada's movements, and pictorially in, you know, in writing, of course, get a very accurate feel for what Prabhupada was going through to get his Bhagavatams printed. And BTG, the printer, is one of the more poignant memories, was the person who printed the PTG for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada would walk, I think it was it 5 miles or would have been kilometers, 5 kilometers, just because he didn't want to pay the bus fare. And he had, you know, very thin dhoti, torn and then sewn and torn and sewn again. And the man said he hadn't, you know, could tell that he hadn't had breakfast, and that his chudder was not thick enough for the weather. He would shiver a little until, you know, he got his hot milk. So, and he would give him breakfast, and then Prabhupada would somehow or other, he convinced the man to give him partial stacks of the BTGs, so that he could sell them, give him his money for the second stack and that kind of thing. And then finally Prabhupada couldn't pay it all. But the man felt like this was a worthy cause, but then it went on for so long. He says, Swamiji, I can't just keep doing this. So that was one reason that there was lapses in the printing of BTGs. Just really no money to do it. So I switched from books to magazines. I have to go back. The magazines were first. He would write them in in Bamsibat in Vrindavan. He had his little room on the roof. Could go up there and see the Yamuna. It was beautiful, beautiful. The birds swinging by and the fish jumping and it's just an amazing view. And he had the little room on the roof, and there was a well that went down, through the floors, or I guess it would be an open square that went down through the different ceilings, and then finally it would go down to the well, and he would pull his water up from the roof, which is quite strenuous. And that's how he got his water up there. And is just really austere and simple, humble places where he stayed and worked and produced so many wonderful literatures that we have now. So it was really exciting that, when the guy said, "Oh yes, this is where the press was that Swamiji used to print his books." He would bring the paper there, and then they would get printed, and he would go up, and he went upstairs and he would edit and proofread the books, and then send them back down, and they'd change, by hand. They would change the typeset until they got it close to being right. You can see the old knockoff books that how there's so many quaint old British language word usages. But when I walked upstairs, it was to see his desk where he edited. Behind him, they instead of closets and anything in wood would get eaten by the termites, so they had right in the walls, in the brick walls, they would leave openings that you could put things in. So instead of a wooden shelf, you'd have a brick shelf or an opening in the wall. Not an opening, but an indentation in the wall. And there, right behind the desk, were piles of the covers for the first canto. And it was like my hair stood on end. It's like, wow, this is really where Prabhupada did it. He sat at this desk and proofread the Bhagavatams. And, that was just amazing to me how, you have to go upstairs, how you could, excuse me, I got distracted there, call from Satsum Raj. So lost my train of thought. So anyway, there's where it happened. He hired an artist to do the covers. So the covers were all Prabhupada, and then from there, the books, the pages, with, I think there was 16 pages on a sheet, on one sheet of paper, and then they would be taken from in that form from the printer. Then they would go to the place where the pages were collated and sewn and then put into covers. I went to one of the places like that, and you could see you could see how they were sewing by hand, and they'd hold the book between their feet, and then put glue in and hammer it shut to hold the pages in. It was so technically it was primitive, but it worked. The books held up for many years. I mean, Prabhupada had them done in, when was that, 60, 60, not 65, say 60. And, they came to America and they were distributed, and they're in libraries, and devotees had them, and they held up. So it was really something to see that process that Prabhupada had to go through to get his books printed. And then he went to the different places to sell them. He was the distributor, the original book distributor. So he went to different places and tried to get standing orders. He'd show them one book and then say, volume, or the next volume is due out at such and such a date. Would you like to make a standing order? It's going to be a 60 volume series. And he tried to get standing orders. And he did, even, one of the more famous ones was he got the embassy, American embassy, to order a standing set for their library, because they, around the world, they had so many people of Indian origin that might come to the library, or at least want to see something from India on the library. So it was just wonderful, because everything was still in place. And then, say the ride from his office in Delhi to where he would write in Vrindavan, you could take the bus, take the rickshaw he wouldn't take a rickshaw, he would walk to the bus station, take a bus, and all that could be described, and nothing had changed. The buildings were there, the same farming was there with no tractors, oxen, and simply a wonderful experience. And also this was reflected in the authenticity of the Lilamrita. That's why it's so important. That's why it stands as such an important book in the books, the authorized books about Prabhupada. This is called the authorized by the GBC. And Satsuma Raj's pure reputation checkered one spot, but he did it. He was able to put that all together and give a really genuine picture of Prabhupada. And he kept himself out of it, even though he was, in a lot of the scenes in America and around, when he was the secretary and servant, when he served in that capacity. And he was an insider with Prabhupada. So it does stand as a really, really important and accurate account of Prabhupada's life. It's not what they call a hagiography. That's a book or a biography written about some spiritual person, or generally spiritual person, that sort of gives spiritual or exaggerated importance to ordinary activities. You know, did you see Swamiji, you know, when he drank water, you know, it was like he was actually drinking Ganges water because he transformed it in the glass before drinking. And or any kind of thing that would like I say, would give an advanced, or not an advanced, but a sort of a skewed picture of someone's activities, ordinary activities that were given great or overrated spiritual importance. So it's not a hagia, it's the academic community really appreciated that it wasn't that kind of a book, that it was very written very accurately, and that the use of oral history was important to them. That's where another place where the interviews come into play is like a lot of it's like Vishaka and Yadabar's film, where they use the words, the exact words of the people that were there, or that he had a slight or major relationship with, and in their own words that would be there, and that's in the biography, and they appreciate that kind of thing. He read, Satsvaraj read many different biographies before he started, and then chose a particular style to follow. What was it? Biography of, I forget. He chose a particular biography and followed that writing style, and so that was appreciated by the academics, that it wasn't a hagiography, and that it was genuine and accurate. Like I said before, you know, we would collect amazing things like I'm sure you've all seen the movie Matchless Gifts by a couple. You know, they were in college making a little documentary film of the Prabhupada and the devotees, and they showed up with their movie. How when I first got to New York, there was like 100 book distributors out every day meeting, you know, 100 people. So like so many potential leads were there, and I just asked everyone, please carry a notepad and write, just as part of your presentation, ask, did you ever meet Swamiji or Prabhupada or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami? So on the first day, one of the ladies came back and had the had the names of this couple who made this documentary, and Matchless Gifts, you've seen it. And then they came to the temple, and we traded a life membership for them in trade for sort of rights to use their film. So we traded the film for life membership, and they were very friendly and warm, because actually they really liked the devotees. And the fact was, if they were still traveling, doing some filming, so they could stay at a temple and tell their story. And they'd always have a place to stay, a place to stay and a place to take prasadam. So that was really a nice find. It's a similar one in the there's that one film of the hippies dancing in a chain around Prabhupada on Hippie Hill. And that movie came from the San Francisco Public Library, one of the largest library in San Francisco. And I just went to this, somehow or other, I went to the movie section, and boom, there it was, so I nipped it. Sorry to say, but that's what happened. That's how we got that film. And different things, news. I'd look through the microfilm. Everything was on microfilm, not on computers. So you have to, go through thousands of pictures on microfilm, to cover the 10 years or 12 years. And then, so we had all that information, anything, we could get from the libraries everywhere. And there was always something. Prabhupada was always an interesting subject matter for them. So all that was there, added to the pile of the growing pile of background information on Prabhupada. And it just kept going, and especially the part where you get leads. You ask somebody, well, where do you know anyone else, where anyone else is that knew Prabhupada or knew Swamiji, and then they, hopefully had contact information. I remember another special amazing event was I met Mukunda Maharaj at the corner of Haight and Ashbury Street, and we had an appointment to meet at 9 a.m. or something. I was staying at the Berkeley Temple, and he was somewhere else, and we were going to meet there. I got there early, and right behind me up some stairs, long stairs, was a very nice bookstore. And they always have their, in the front of a bookstore, they usually have a table with the latest books that came in. So I went and I was looking, it was like, I forget the name of the book, but right on that table, there was a book with, it was like the 60s, people from the 60s that were still around doing things, at that time when the book was written. This would have been, 1979 still. So who's who in the zoo, pretty much. But I opened it up, and the end papers, it was the devotees. That was their doing kirtan on Hippie Hill. So it, it was just amazing. So that meant that all these people that were interviewed in that book had memories. They were there with the devotees and Prabhupada. So I started just tracking them down, and I got some amazing and funny. It was a funny group because they had all been into drugs and the hippie life, and a lot of them actually were. They thought I was, maybe the police or something, and they were a little hesitant to tell me, where I could meet with them and that kind of thing. So there was that element of fear of reprisal in the San Francisco interviews. So that was for volume 3. They were funny. Wolfman Jack is a famous radio announcer. Wolfman Jack. And he had a real husky voice, smoker's voice, and funny character, and charismatic. He was still doing his radio show. So these are all ingredients for Satsvarup Raj for his, and then with all these ingredients, he stirred the ingredients and brought out the Prabhupada Lilamrita with so much solid evidence, and that you could never match it today. It's just impossible to match that evidence. That's why we say, read the whole thing, because you're getting first class information. And the other thing we would do in the interviews is they'd say who else was there, and we'd keep notes. And when they interview that person, we'd cross-examine them, and say, well, what, who else was there? What color were the walls? Or, what did Prabhupada say about this? And it'd be like a cross-examination that they didn't know was going on, because I had previously talked to someone else that was there. So that was another layer of what's the word I'm looking for? Another layer of authenticity that is very important to a book like this. So let's see what time it is. So there's 20 minutes. Is it 20 minutes left?
5:09.
So it was 4 to 5:30. Why don't we have, that's a background on the Lilamrita. Why don't we have questions? I guess they can come in on the phone, or they can be phoned to Vanamali Prabhu, and then he can choose which questions to pass along. He's got my number. Everybody has my number. But it'd be good if he screened the calls and then put them in order, and I'll take questions, and we can go like that for, I have another service to do in half an hour, so we could go for half an hour if you'd like. It's it's really too bad we can't have a two-way communication, but that's the way it goes in the electronic world. So I'll wait for a phone call from Vanamali Pandit Prabhu, and then we'll take it from there.
Hare Krishna Vanamali Prabhu. So
Maybe I'll
can
go
we have
get a
all of
drink
us
of water
post?
while I'm waiting. I'll be
You want me to
right
bring you
back.
water?
I'll just go get it. I need to move my leg.
Yeah, yeah.
Vanamali Prabhu, can we have everyone post in the chat so that you can at the end call Prabhuji and give all the questions?
Yes, bro.
So,
I said
dear
yes.
devotees, please post everything on the chat.
So I hope.
I just spoke with Guru Maharaj, and he said that he remembers the story about taking picture of the publishing
Oh yeah,
station. He said that was scary.
yeah, yeah. It was because the crowds in India. You know, I was sleeping on the nasty floor in the Howrah, the infamous Howrah train station in Calcutta.
Your phone?
I actually saw a crowd
Do it works in
move
US?
in on
Your phone?
some
Yeah.
guy. I think he sold a flat bottle of soda to somebody.
75
For some reason, there was a fight.
518
And the crowd moved in, you know, to figure out what was going on. And then there was somehow or other, the crowd decided to, they stomped the guy to death. He was just pulped. Haribo Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. This is Vanamali Pandit Das. Please accept my humble
Yes.
obeisances.
These are my obeisances.
So I think I'm just waiting for someone. Okay. I don't know. We haven't gotten anything on the chat, but maybe I can begin asking some questions. Prabhu,
Okay.
okay. Do you remember any conversation with Srila Prabhupada's sons or his family members? Because I think in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, we could not find anything, the Prabhupada's conversation with his sons anywhere, or any details which was given by Srila Prabhupada's sons. Did we do any kind of interview with them?
Well, at the time we were doing, okay, I'll speak for, the question is there any information about Prabhupada's family from that time? Because it doesn't appear like there's any interviews in the book. And unfortunately, at the time, they had initiated a legal fight to take over ISKCON. They're saying, well, this is our father, and these are all his properties, so they should come to us, as rightful heirs. And the other side, from our side, the answer is, well, he's a sadhu, he's civilly dead when he takes sannyas, and that's in India. Everybody knows that a swami is, has given up his relationship or connection with the family. So that held up in court, and I believe there was some money outside, some sort of payment, maybe some sort of arrangement to take care of his wife and children, a certain amount of money, but certainly not. They weren't, they didn't get ISKCON itself and all the properties, but they may have gotten something. So that whole drama was going on during the interviews, and therefore they weren't cooperating. Ultimately, I think, I heard that Vrindavan, his most responsive son, or his best son, who tried to help him in the business and, in general, be a good son and do what his father told him to do and help him out. Vrindavan Das, or Vrindavan. And ultimately, I think he wrote a biography, not a biography, a journal. He had kept a journal, and it reversed an important detail where we had said there was just this one taxi driver was the only person there to see Prabhupada off to America. And in Vrindavan Das's journal was an entry that he was there and a few other people. So Prabhupada didn't leave alone, walking up the stairs and coming to America with a 0 person travel party congratulating him on his travels. So that's the story. That's why his family wasn't involved in the interviews, because it was the legal battle was going on, and then they, you don't, legally you're not supposed to have any association with the other party. So, any other question? Does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you. I think that was one thing bothering. Okay, but it's great. Prabhu, we have a question from Induleka Mataji. She's asking, I have a question about your travels. Were you able to travel to Moscow? Devotees were persecuted there. Just curious about your experience there.
Yeah, no, at that time I wasn't allowed to go. The Cold War was going on, and I'm an American, so that blocked me from going. The Indians had a much better relationship at that time, so that's what was going on. I had an American passport, and Americans were not welcome in Russia during the Cold War, because that would have been, that's what was going on.
Thank you, Prabhu. So we have a question from Krishnan Vaidyanathan. He's asking, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, how is all the research material you collected maintained now?
What I did was,
What was the question?
So the question was, what happened to all the material that was collected during that time? So what was beginning to happen was people wanted to have access to that. And since no one was funding us, BBT was giving a very little bit of money, and we had to collect the rest ourselves. So we sort of felt that it was especially me, that it was our our decision what to do with that. And for me, I was getting pressure from different senior devotees to turn over the records. So it was not in a proper mood. It was looking in the interviews. A lot of times people
I'm just
speak
taking care. I think I have
half
to
an
go.
hour, sometimes more, about why I left Krishna consciousness and who, which authority did something to me that made me leave, or who did what to me. And a lot of those people were still senior devotees, and there was a lot of misinformation and very emotional information that would be damaging to, or in the wrong hands, to different devotees. So I decided that what I did was I sent the material back without making a copy. I sent the interviews back to the person and said, please read this and send back anything more that you remember. So in that way, the people got back their own interview, and I thought that was a reasonable way to send it back, a reasonable way to dispose of it, I guess is the way to say it. And the person that was heaviest on me to get the information, I finally had to say, I'm sorry, sir, but actually, if you want to know the truth, about 50% of the people that left said it was because of you. So after that, he didn't pursue the subject any further. And he was very known to be very heavy and a little bit on the cruel side. So that's what happened to the and a lot of the there was a fire at the press too, and there was things destroyed in the fire. So does that answer your question sufficiently?
Krishna Prabhu.
Haribo? Oh, okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Who's DR?
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu.
No. There is a DR who's asking, what is the full name of DR? I don't know who's down. DR means.
Prabhuji, that's democracy. Hare Krishna.
Yes. The question is, did I have any personal interaction with Prabhupada? And the fact is that I joined in 1977 in June in Berkeley Temple, San Francisco area. And I joined in June, and Prabhupada left in November. So during that time, it was such a serious mood, and his health was so bad, there was no letters, no one could visit. It was very restricted. So for that reason, I had no personal interaction, but I felt through the interviews because they were so, the memories were, none of them were more than, except for the ones in India, like the from the volume, the first volume, Preparing to Come, A Lifetime in Preparation. Except for them, all the other volumes, there was no memories older than 12 years. So that's not very long. They were very emotional and like heartrending. So I felt very satisfied by the end of it that I had, perhaps even more of a relationship with Prabhupada than most devotees, because the information wasn't out yet from the whole Lilamrita. And so much of it didn't go in. We had space limitations. It could have been 3 times as long, but then just from the point of, the reading and attention span, you couldn't put that much in. In fact, the 7th volume was composed of individual little books that came out about things that Prabhupada did that, like another arrival in Los Angeles, that type of thing. Or there was one, 108 Roses, where another temple opening. But different things had very good information about them. And so they were just sitting there waiting to be printed. So they're all put in one volume. And then ultimately that was connected to instead of a 6-volume series, it's a 7-volume series now. So that's one thing. I forgot, what was the question again? I'm getting a little tired here. My personal. So personally, I felt very close to Prabhupada from doing the interviews, because it was the people themselves were so, devotees or people that met him, it was so his association was so fresh in their minds, and then that was passed along to me. So I felt like practically I didn't miss anything in terms of what he was doing and where he was and everything else. That Shakti was passed to me.
Prabhu, one another thing, during the interviews, had you had any one of us in the team got any opportunity to interact or to interview some of Srila Prabhupada's God brothers, and what was their mood or their response after that when Srila Prabhupada left? Did we get any, I don't know, any positive reviews, or we got still?
There was a few of his god brothers that were, very friendly, that they were friends of his, and associates that, he had collected money with them, and, he would go introduce a person to one of his wealthy clients. And they would give a lecture and, collect for a temple, local temple, that kind of thing. So he was, a collector, and then he would work with his god brothers, and certain ones, were very friendly. So they were interviewed, and they were, included in the interviews. And some of them, they knew Prabhupada from they were a very young age, maybe 16 years old, and then knew a new brahmachari in one of the mats, that kind of thing. So, yes, the answer is yes. Some of his godbrothers were interviewed, and others weren't because they were, openly, I guess you'd have to say they were offensive. So stayed away from them. Is there any other? Did I write a book? No. Satsuma Maharaj has written, he was, he was still on a roll, say, I don't know if you know that connotation, but he was very much Prabhupada conscious after all this intense writing. So he himself wrote more openly from his point of view. The biography, he was transparent and practically non-existent in the biography. But then, he himself wrote, I think, 10 other books about Prabhupada, remembering Prabhupada meditation, 100 Prabhupada poems, that type of thing. So he's written more books about Prabhupada from the viewpoint of a person that, separate from the Lilamrita. And he wrote on his own, so there's no necessity for me to write a book. He's the writer. I'm just the worker bee.
Any other questions, devotees, you have? You can ask to Prabhu.
Any other questions?
I guess devotees are happy, Prabhu. So they would like to, they are expressing their appreciation to you. So thank you, Prabhu, for your time. We are very grateful to you for sharing your experiences.
Nice subject.
It is. Trust me, I would like to go on for maybe a few more hours, but
yeah,
they would ask you so many questions.
I actually have to go. I have other services in terms of but
thank you.
It's too. So I have to make an offering to his deities, and organize his bedding and that kind of thing. So time is up for me.
Yeah. So thank you, Prabhu, once again on behalf of entire ISKCON Boston and all the devotees here. We express our deepest gratitude to you and all glories to your wonderful services. I think because of the team, because of His Holiness Sutsarup Das Goswami, we are able to actually relish Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. We are able to understand Srila Prabhupada. We are able to understand what devotion is. We are able to understand how devotees' dealings were and how Srila Prabhupada's dealings were. It's one of the greatest gifts perhaps we could ever get it. And this will be for all the devotees in future generation, one of the wonderful gift. I think even gratitude would be the euphemism. It would be the very small word for this one. So, but thank you once again, dear Baladeva Vidyabhushan Prabhu, from core of our heart. So, on behalf of entire ISKCON Boston, we would like to thank you by loudly chanting Haribo,
Haribo.
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 Oh, I can hear now.
Haribo.
Oh, I guess that's coming through your phone, right?
Haribo. Haribo.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, dear Prabhu. So maybe Prabhu, one more request that we I think we got that if some devotees said that they're going to read. I think even Indulekha Mata said she's going to read now Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and devotees will again read Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, and maybe we can have one more session maybe after a few months down the line.
Yeah, maybe after people read the whole Lilamrita, then we can, the 6 books, and maybe we can have another conversation.
Yes, Lord. Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu, once again.
But people should read, they should read the book first, and then we have pertinent questions. Read the books.
Yep. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So
Thank you.
I'll close the meeting. Thank you for inviting me to speak on such a nectarian subject matter.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. It's
All
really
right.
and a great privilege to hear from you and to host you.